Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now gird up your loins like a man, and I'll ask you, and you instruct me." All the way to 12?
Yes, please.
Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who set its measurements, since you know? Or who stretched the line on it? Or what were its base sunk? Where were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who enclosed the sea with doors? When bursting forth it went out from the womb? When I made a cloud its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band? And I placed boundaries on it, and I set a bolt and doors. And I said, "Thus far you shall come, but no farther. And here you shall your proud waves stop." Have you ever in your life commanded the morning and caused the dawn to know its place?
Okay. The next one we'll just summarize. It's Psalm 73, and it's the question of why are the wicked prospering and struggling with that concept. So, and then the next one is Genesis 2:16 and 17. I guess I can read that. "And the Lord God commanded the man, and saying, Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat thereof you shall surely die." And the last one is Revelation 21:3 and 4.
Revelation 21:3 and 4. "And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away."
Amen. That's also our memory text for today, too. So the quarterly says, "Perhaps the greatest problem facing Christianity is the problem of evil. How to reconcile the fact that God is perfectly good and loving with the fact of evil in this world. In brief terms, if God is all good and all powerful, why is there evil and so much of it too? This is not merely an academic problem, but something that deeply troubles many people and that keeps some of them from coming to know and love God. I know several people who are in that position. They cannot reconcile in their minds this, and so because of that, they will not accept God as their, as their Lord. Great controversy quote, "To many minds, the origin of sin and the reason for its existence are a source of great perplexity. They see the work of evil with its terrible results of woe and desolation, and they question how all this can exist under the sovereignty of one who is infinite in wisdom, in power, and in love. Here is a mystery of which they find no explanation." Many atheists identify the problem of evil as the reason that they are atheists, but as we will see in this week and in coming weeks, the God of the Bible is entirely good, and we can trust him even despite the evil that so infects our fallen world. So Mondays, so we read already, I think Job 30:26, but I want to just take one more look at it to examine it. Job 30:26. When I looked for good, then evil came to me, and when I waited for light, there came darkness. How do these, and then it talks about Jeremiah 12:1. Did anybody, we didn't read those yet. Jeremiah 12:1. As we go into this study, we'll see that there is a prominent struggle with our thinking, and not only ours, but the angels in heaven are struggling with the same problem. Jeremiah 12:1. Righteous are you, O Lord, when I plead with you, yet let me talk with you of your judgments. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why are all they happy that deal very treacherously? So on and on it goes. So we can look up those other texts, but it's the same question coming up, struggling with, Lord, where are you? And as I look at the front of the quarterly, it has weigh scales. It has love and justice, or justice and love or something. Or you could call it love and mercy in the weigh scales. And they seem like they're colliding with each other. And that's the struggle that human beings are dealing with. Satan will prompt a person to go to one extreme or the other, or God gets blamed on both ends of the stick here. One end of the stick is that they see everything as God doing it in wrath and anger and everything. Why did he take this person from me? And why did this happen? And, God is the bad guy. Okay? And the other is God is so merciful that, live as you want, heaven is your home. And that's actually a motto for some groups. They don't believe that God he's too loving to be hard on anybody or difficult with anybody, so it doesn't matter, he'll love you anyway. So, we don't be obedient, disobedient, we're all going to be in heaven. And the secular mind of God is like that. So it's both are a distortion. And I think how that distortion comes is that people think that they understand God when God is his own person, and he explains himself and he talks for himself, and so he will show what he's like and what we can expect of him. But we think we've got it all figured out. God is like this, and my prayers are just kind of telling God what we want him to do, and he'll do it for us, without understanding that God makes his own decisions. So, how do these texts bring the problem of evil to the forefront of human experience? I think they're plainly stating a quandary that people can't get, an answer. What? Yes, I'm sorry.
It brings to mind the word ego, which is different than self-esteem.
Excellent point. It's one of
Ego is in thought.
Yeah, I have a section on ego, and it's coming. Okay, you kind of jumped ahead of me, but you hit the nail right on the head on that. Okay, these texts raise many questions that are still with us today. Why does it seem as though the wicked prosper and those who do evil benefit from their evil? Perhaps not always, but still often enough. Why do the righteous suffer so much? Where is God when evil occurs? Why does God sometimes appear to be far from us and even hidden? Okay, the next one is Matthew 27:46, and we also read that, but I just want to read it again. Matthew 27. 46.
Let me just say one thing.
Sure. Yeah, I can't share. Yes.
If my voice will hold up. I think one of the problems is that human lifespans are so short that the long-term consequences of pursuing short-term gain don't often affect the people that do the initial actions. And I think that is part of the reason why the wicked seem to prosper more than they should in the world that we live in. If they lived longer, they would have a harder time doing that, I think.
Even Jesus struggled with, Lord, where are you? Why don't you do something? Like, even Jesus is dealing with that. Matthew 27:46. Then about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Where are you? Why don't you come and, help me, kind of thing. What Christ did on the cross defeated the source of evil, Satan, and will eventually undo evil entirely. On the cross, Jesus looked forward to a hope that at the time he could not see. So I want to read what we read in our devotional reading for today, and also a few other quotes. The problem of evil is the thing for today. Was there ever, this is Today with God by Ellen White. Was there ever suffering and sorrow like that which was borne by our dying Savior? But it was not physical suffering alone. It was the thought that God's love was withdrawn that made his cup so bitter. It was not pain of body that so quickly ended the life of Christ upon the cross. It was the crushing weight of the sins of the world that broke his heart. The Father's glory, the Father's love had left him, and it was this that forced from his lips the anguished cry, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Oh, this is from Letters and Manuscripts. This was our devotional reading. I have that later. With deepest pain, here's where the angels come in. The angels are struggling with the same question that humanity is struggling with, that Jesus was struggling with. Where are you, God? Why aren't you doing something? And they see the wrong. It affects them. They want some solution, and something's stopping it from happening. Okay. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? With deepest pain, the angels saw the despairing agony of the Son of God. Though there were few of the human race that felt pity for his suffering, yet nature groaned for her bleeding and dying author. The earth trembled, the sun refused to behold the scene. The heavens gathered blackness, and the angels hid their faces from the awful sight. The innocent suffering man of Calvary felt the woe that sin makes by cutting off the soul from God. The powers of darkness pressed their temptations upon him. Satan boasted that Christ was now in his hands, that he was stronger than the Son of God, and that God no longer owned him as his son. If God still loved him, why did he not save him from death? Who's behind all that? It's Satan. Such were the thoughts that Satan pressed upon the Son of God. There were hosts of evil angels thronging about the cross, and the holy angels were not permitted to break ranks and put to flight the reviling foe. Talk about an inward struggle that the holy angels had to be, obedient to God when they saw all of what Satan was doing and they wanted to do something. I'm still reading and then I'll get to you. Jesus could not see through the portals of the tomb, Bright hope did not present to him the fact that he would come forth from the grave a victor over death, or tell him that his Father accepted his sacrifice. All that he felt during this time of darkness was that the sins of the world were laid upon him, and that their penalty, death, might forever shut him away from the face of his Father. The temptation to think that his Father had forever left him caused that fearful cry from the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" But when, in his dying agonies, despair pressed upon the soul of the Redeemer, he remembered that tokens had been given to him of his Father's love. And as he yielded up his precious life by faith alone, he rested in him whom it had been his joy to obey. Though surrounded by gloom, yet amid the awful darkness which was felt even by nature, the Redeemer drained the cup of suffering to the dregs. By faith, and get the picture here, this is just before he bows his head and dies, just before he uses all his strength to say, "It is finished," into your hands. Like, he's starting to fade out of consciousness. And she says, by faith he dimly believes that he shall triumph over death. And he cries with a loud voice, "Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit." And then he bows his head and he dies. He knows that his Father is full of mercy, justice, and compassion and love, and in trustful confidence he yields himself to God. There is a great earthquake, and the people hear the man of Calvary say in his last breath, "It is finished." Jesus did not yield up his life until he had done the work which he came to do. With his latest breath he had said, "It is finished." Angels rejoiced as they heard the words that told them that the mission of Christ had been successful. They knew that Satan was defeated, his kingdom lost. Christ had not shunned death to carry out the plan of salvation, and there was joy in heaven because through faith in Christ the sons of Adam could finally be raised to a seat upon the throne of God. But though, this one is from Manuscripts, Letter 18, just a little bit here. But though apparently forsaken by God, never was he more beloved of his Father. And in those dreadful hours, Christ relied on the evidence of his Father's acceptance heretofore given him. He was acquainted with the character of his Father. He understood his justice, his mercy, and his great love. By faith he rested in him whom it had ever been his joy to obey. And as in submission he committed himself to God, the sense of the loss of his Father's favor was withdrawn. By faith Christ was a victor. Yeah, Marker, go ahead.
But deliver us from evil. Are we always protected? And Satan have never hardly access to, unless God allow us to be led into temptation to think that God have left us. God have left. And so that's where we have to cry even more for God's help. I just always wondered that prayer, lead us not into temptation, and there is at times that even the trials that we go through in life sometime. Just like when we went through the cancer, when I went through the cancer, and I was stuck. I had a stack of promises in my hand, little cards and stuff, and I read them through over and over again. I had a struggle at times to think, why have you forsaken me? I'm sure everybody have some kind of a temptations to think that I'm all alone. Everybody have abandoned me.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to have a conversation about this topic, because what Jesus going through, we will go through it also in the end of time, in the time of time of trouble, and psychological and mental wrestling will be the greatest struggle that we ever face.
Exactly. I heard a sermon about explaining that, and it made sense, but I've forgotten what it was, which is no help at all. Okay, what?
One of the things that I've often wondered about was Jesus' response while he was on the cross and while he was being crucified. And while he was being crucified means while he was being nailed to pieces of board and then put up. It seems to me that the Lord's Prayer has a key to that, because it says, deliver us from evil. And the easiest thing to do when somebody is doing bad things to you is to respond in kind. And deliverance from evil to me means not responding in kind. That is the hardest thing. And God was demonstrating under the most extreme circumstances that we could possibly think of, the torture of the cross and all the revilings and all the things that were going on. He was demonstrating how to be delivered from evil. And that I think is very important for us to understand in our own lives, because we will all face times when the temptation to respond in kind is almost, it may be overwhelming for us. And it's only by trusting God and being able to pray that prayer that we can be delivered from evil, that we will not respond with the crooked way of thinking that is impacting us so terribly. It's a difficult thing.
I was thinking about how Jesus started the world, and that is with Adam and Eve and a test. And the test was, here's this tree, don't eat from it. And, everybody in life is tested by God. And how do they get tested except for that he allows them to have free access to good or evil, and he says, please obey me, but he doesn't force anybody. And my take on what Jesus said, lead us not into temptation, is hold on to me, so that I don't yield to temptation. Like Job had intercessory prayer for his sons and daughters every time they had a birthday party or a feast or whatever. He did that to help them to be protected. If they were protected all the time, he wouldn't have to pray extra, for their protection and their salvation and stuff. Yeah, go ahead. No, but exactly. Keep me in the palm of your hand. Help me when we're unaware of Satan coming at us. That's when we fall. So it's a prayer to say, Lord, help me to be conscious of you all the time, instead of in a time where I'm not aware, all of a sudden Satan comes in, puts a thought in us, and, oh, that's a good idea, and then we run off. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The Lord was led into the wilderness and tempted, and he was tried, and he was victorious.
Mhm.
That in itself, we have to go through these trials of life. Otherwise, we won't have faith. Otherwise, we won't be able to come to God like we can. So lead me not into temptation. Everything that we go through, like you said, it's a test. We have to choose between good and evil. But sometimes I think we forget about God, because then we lean on our own understanding of what it is we want. And then we cry out like, Lord, why? And it's like, but you chose this. And the Lord allows us to go through the consequences for the things that we have chosen. And that's when we think that God has left us. But he hasn't. That's our choice. And sometimes those choices lead us further down into more temptation and darker holes.
Yeah.
But it's all that if we remember the prayer in those times, we will choose right.
Yeah.
But not right in our eyes, though.
Yeah.
Choose God.
Yeah. It's ki-
There's times that dark is pressing very heavily. And those times, actually, our faith will grow in the end if we just stick with Christ and hang on with God.
Yeah.
I will not let you go.
Yeah.
I went through that battle. I will not let you go, and I didn't even understand what I was saying, but
yeah.
because the darkness was so, I don't know.
Yeah.
Some people here knows what I went through.
Yeah.
I was in the hospice to die in palliative care twice, 3 times in hospice and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was in the edge. I was living on the edge.
Yeah.
So,
I think.
and I, by the way, before the cancer, I asked that God would take me from this rut that I was in. And I was in serving God in Fountainview, and I thought that I was seventh heaven there when I went there. But there's a times that sometimes life sketches will hit really hard.
Yeah.
And I didn't grow in my Christian life. I felt like I was going backward.
And God stepped in on that.
Yeah.
I have 3/4 of the lesson to get through. I remembered part of that sermon. I think the translation is not as accurate as it could be. I think what the meaning of lead me not into temptation is keep me in the hour of temptation. When temptation comes to me, hold on to me. I think that's more the meaning that should be in, or that was in the scriptures, rather than lead me not into temptation. Hold on to me in temptation and deliver me from evil.
I literally just checked that.
Yeah.
The verse can also be translated, lead us less into temptation, or lead us lest we fall into temptation.
Lead us,
So it's
comma.
It's
Lest.
the word is translated not can also be translated less. So I just
Okay.
thought I would throw that in there.
L-E-S-T.
Yeah.
Yeah, L-E-S-T. Lead me, Lord, lest I fall into temptation. Yeah, I knew it was a translation issue. Okay, so Monday, we're going to get into Job a bit here. The end of history will come with the triumph of love over evil. But in the meantime, many troubling questions remain. How can we think and talk about the problem of evil in a way that might be helpful? Okay, I would like Job 38, 1 to 12, please. Somebody, can they read that? Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding, who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy? Who shut in the sea with doors? When it burst forth from the womb, when I made clouds its garments, and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed bounds for it, and set bars and doors, and said, Thus far shall you come, and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed. Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the skirts of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it? It is changed like clay under the seal. It is dyed like a garment. From the wicked their light is withheld, and their uplifted arm is broken." 15?
To 12? To 12.
Oh, okay. John.
Okay. You got that. Okay. So it says, God's response to Job is striking. Specifically, the Lord answered Job out of a whirlwind and said, "Who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge?" One translation puts it this way, "Why do you talk so much when you know so little?" That is exactly it. And I would like to have a point that all the way through this narrative that Jesus or God is speaking, he never answers Job. He just gives him a broader viewing of everything. And at the beginning of the Sabbath school, I said that we think we understand God and we talk from our perspective, but God talks about himself and explains that he is his own person and that he can speak for himself, basically. So I'd like to look at Isaiah 55, 8 and 9. Anybody has it before I can get to it, go ahead and read it. Yeah. Right. And Isaiah 57:15, I'll do that. For thus saith the high and lofty one that inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place, with him also that is of a contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. God is speaking of himself and what the conditions are of him dwelling with people. The conditions are that he dwells with a person of a humble and contrite heart. Okay? So back to the end of Job. They didn't cover this in the quarterly, but I wanted to bring it out. Right at the end, (42) 7 to 9. Okay, so after he finishes talking to Job, he addresses the three friends. Okay, and he says, "So it was that after the Lord had spoken these words to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, My wrath is kindled against you and against your two friends, for you have not spoken of me the thing that is right, as my servant Job has. Therefore take to you now 7 bullocks and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up for yourselves a burnt offering. And my servant Job shall pray for you. For him I will accept, lest I deal with you after your folly, in that you have not spoken of me the thing which is right, like my servant Job. God is showing his personality here. He's showing forgiveness, but he's showing justice and wrath. And he's also showing the condition of which will be accepted. They were chastising Job, and Jesus was saying to them, you need to go to Job and humble yourself, bring an offering, and ask Job, be in a position where you are asking Job to intercede for you so that I don't deal with you according to your, folly. And in these questions, where is God? The ones that are presuming on his mercy or presuming he is a terrible God, they're talking from ego. He had a issue with the friends saying, like, they got a whole book of their wisdom, of, here, Job, we'll straighten you out. And he's saying, you guys are folly, and so I'm seeing, and people don't know, they have honest questions. Some of them are tear-jerking questions about God, but it all comes from self-confidence, self-awareness of God is like this, and I'm upset, or I'm this or that, I'm that. And it's God saying, when you humble yourself, I dwell with those of a humble and contrite spirit. And we need to understand that how we view things like prayer, we think we have to pray and God will answer it the way we want to answer it. Prayer isn't a vending machine that we can just put our request in and have God rubber stamp it because it looks right to us. God's saying, my thoughts aren't your thoughts. I see past where you are. You need to come and humble yourself to me. Like, prayer is a reconciling of ourselves with God. It isn't our wish list and having God just, give his stamp of approval on it. So that's where the ego comes in. I didn't label it as that, but it occurred to me that in their supposed wisdom and chastising and blaming Job, God had to say, here's the conditions, and I'm upset with you about this. I know him and then you. I'm upset with you about this. When you are in a position where you're not so sure of yourself anymore, and coming to Job, whom I accept, and ask, him to give an offering on your behalf, then I will accept you, and that's what happens. So I think when we humble ourselves, God can reach us and answer our questions, even if we don't get specific answers. Job still didn't know it right at the end, but he was okay with not knowing. Okay, go ahead.
Well, there's something to read Job 42, third portion, fifth verse. So we see that I have done good without knowledge. Therefore I have uttered that I understand not. And three difficulties, which I know not. Here I beseech thee, and I will speak. I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. I have heard of thee, but hear you in my ears, but now I speak. I beseech thee. I just wonder, this hearing but not seeing. I just wonder what it is to really seeing the difference for hearing. Hearing of, is it majority of us, are we just a hearing? Or is there experiences where somebody could say that I have seen? It's to me, it's like, do we see God like Job? Or do we have to see God like Job?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. He's got, and then
Go
you-
ahead, Arlen.
When I was in a Bible class once, it was pointed out that there are two different stories in the book of Job. There's the test of Job, and there's the test of his friends. Job is tested on how well he knows God and how well he trusts God. His friends are as well. But his friends are tested in a different way. And Job passed his test,
Yeah.
his friends did not.
Yeah, he humbled himself right there, and they didn't. God had to tell them to humble themselves. Go ahead.
That was that's why at the end there that chapter that part is included. The story didn't need to make mention of the friends, but it did because there was a separate lesson to be learned from their experience and their interactions with his trial, as there is to be learned from Job directly. You can just study the parts with the friends and learn an entirely different set of lessons in that circumstance. I just thought I would point that out.
Yeah, excellent. Yes, go ahead.
So in Job chapter 42, verse 5, it says, I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. That's what you're referring to, Mark. So I've always read that this way. I've heard for you by the hearing of the ear. In other words, hearsay.
Or passed down. He was taught by his
it's hearsay.
parents. Yeah.
It's what other people are talking about, right? But now my eye sees you, right? So what Job is saying here is that a lot of these things that he was struggling with were the result of what he thought about God from what he had been told about God. When God comes into your life and he's right in your face, it's an entirely different circumstance. And when you talk about facing death, I think that is a situation where when a person faces death, they think a lot differently than when they're just sort of wandering through their life. It gives them a very sharp perception of what is true and what is not. It clarifies. It makes things a lot clearer. And I think that's what happened to Job here when the Lord came to his and said, this is who I am.
It's basically nothing else matters but you, Lord.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
This Job is very similar to
We got to go.
This story of Job is very similar to the prodigal son. There's two messages.
Okay. By his response to Job, God made it clear that there are many things that Job did not know and did not understand. Like Job, we too should humbly recognize that there are many things going on in the world and behind the scenes that we know nothing about. The fact that we may not know the answers to our questions does not mean that there are no good answers, or that one day everything will not be resolved. Until then, we need to trust in the goodness of God, which has been revealed to us in so many ways. That's where Job said, and he shone right there, he said, though he slay me, though he kills me, yet I will trust him. His vote was for the Lord no matter what. He did have questions, and he tried to wrestle with those, but his vote went on the Lord's side and not blaming God or anything, like that. So he passed that test. There's, I'm in 93. 3 here. Second. The problem of evil and suffering presents a challenge to humanity. Job raises several questions in the midst of his feeling powerless to solve the problems of evil. Yet instead of providing answers, God asks more questions. In turn, Job recognizes his limitations to properly understand the reality of evil. We are encouraged to approach the problem of evil with hope. We should learn to live with unanswered questions about the problem of evil or about anything. Sin is an intruder, and no reason can be given to fully explain its presence in our world. God's love helps us approach the problem with hope. Perhaps the most disturbing book in Scripture is The Problem of Evil in Job. It seems to provide a basic summary of how Job feels in the situation of deep sorrow. While one would expect that the appearance of God at the end of the book would finally offer the explanations needed for the conclusion of the narrative, we find we are left with more questions. Instead of it giving answers, God asks Job several questions. Essentially, the Lord asks him about the mysteries of creation in order to contrast how small Job is as a creature in comparison with the greatness of the Creator. As Job realizes this stark contrast and humbly recognizes his limited understanding about life and the created world, he sees himself as the one who hides counsel and without knowledge. For as he emphasized, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me. So think about how little we know about anything. Why then should we learn to live with unanswered questions about the most difficult of subjects, evil and suffering, so that we don't repeat what so many have repeated? I don't understand why God won't stop the evil, therefore I will not believe in God. I don't understand why God doesn't answer this question, therefore I will not believe in fill in the blank, his church, his people, whatever. When we make an ultimatum like that, we go past where Job said, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. We're doing what the atheists are doing. Here's the reason I'm an atheist, because God isn't fixing everything. So then we go on, we don't have a lot of time left, but we can go on to free will defense on Wednesday. However much we don't understand of God's ways and thoughts, Scripture does reveal some things that help us to address the problem of evil. One avenue for addressing the logical problem of evil is known as the free will defense. So, God does not deprive us of the results of our choices, or we would never know what is wrong with sin and evil. If God did what they were wanting him to do, fix all the evil in the world, then people could sin rapidly and be taken away from the learning curve of cause and effect. Like you touch this stove, your hot stove, I get burnt. Learning cause and effect. Little kids learn what's good and what's bad by cause and effect. If God intervenes and fixes everything, we wouldn't see what's wrong with doing wrong or what's wrong with evil. And we can't have Christ's character and know what righteousness is if we don't see any evil in evil. Yes? Yeah.
It's like common sense. Common sense is a learned process.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. Did you? No. Okay. Every day of our lives, to one degree or another, we ourselves exercise free will given to us by our Creator. Without free will, we would not be recognizably human. God wants to be loved by people, by their own choices, by their free will. If they didn't have any options, then our love to God would not mean anything. He has to be appreciated for who he is in order for that to be of any value to him. And what did I do here? I have to read this part before we end up. Evil is not the product of God, but of his creatures' misuse of the free will that he gave them. God didn't create evil. He created people to be free to choose what they wanted, and evil was a result of their misuse of the free will. To exclude the possibility of evil would also exclude the potential of love, which is at the heart of God's character. In granting free will, God limited his own. In granting free will to his creatures, God limited his own free will. He didn't want evil to exist. He hurts when it hurts, and he is restraining himself, like at the cross. He wanted to stop it too, but he restrained himself on principle so that the whole, plan of salvation could go in. He restrained his own free will in order to give us free will. And people put a character decision on God. He doesn't care. That's why he's not doing anything. He's up there and he doesn't care. They don't have any right to do that. He cares terribly or greatly, but people go on the ego, go on the I know what's going on, and therefore God is like this, and they don't understand that they're talking way, past where they can understand. Trusting in God's character helps us to navigate the tension between love, freedom, and the existence of evil. When we look at what's happening in this world and we still understand that when God has his way without Satan interfering, he will bring us back to the paradise that we had before Satan entered and ruined it. So in the meantime, we trust that he's a loving God, and not that he's an evil person or evil entity because he's not doing what we want him to do at this moment in time. So is there anybody that would like to, I have one more thing to read. Sorry. The law of love being the foundation of the government of God, the happiness of all intelligent beings depended upon the perfect accord with its great principles of righteousness. God desires from all his creatures the service of love, service that springs from an appreciation of his character. He takes no pleasure in a forced obedience, and to all he grants freedom of will, that they may render him voluntary service. That was from Patriarchs and Prophets, page 34. Okay. So is there somebody that would like to have closing prayer? Thank you.